Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. This is eyeshadow palette month, and today we're talking about eyeshadow palettes that I didn't buy. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. This is another installment in my eyeshadow palette month series that I'm doing throughout all of August. I've got a giveaway running for you guys. I'm going to have some discount codes, and we are also going to be talking about eyeshadow palettes every single day on the channel. And today I thought I could give you a quick little overview of 10 eyeshadow palettes that sparked my interest, that I was definitely interested in buying, but that I ended up not getting in the end, and why. So before we get into the video, it may be good to know who you're watching, just in case you're new here. My name is Maaike. I've been a makeup reviewer for more than a decade who has fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone, and this obviously means that it influences how I feel about makeup very much so. Eyeshadow palettes is one of my favorite topics to chat about, so that's why we're doing eyeshadow palette month, and I hope you'd like to stick around for more of my content in case you're interested, so please consider subscribing. So yes, 10 eyeshadow palettes that were definitely on my radar, that I like the look of, but that I didn't buy, sometimes for very obvious reasons, and sometimes also just for really petty reasons, because as you will see this month, I have plenty of eyeshadow palettes. I really don't need any more, so I definitely want to try and be a little pickier of what I get and what I don't get, and just because something looks interesting to me is no longer going to be a feasible reason for me to buy it. Which is why I have selected 10 palettes for you today that have come out, I think in the past year or so, that are not part of my collection, that I definitely eyed up for a moment, but that in the end I decided not to get. And the first palette on this list is a quite recent release, and this is the Natasha Denona Golden. I will be putting up some pictures to show you what these palettes look like in case you don't know what they look like. And the Natasha Denona Golden was the most recent Natasha Denona midi-sized release that we got, which, you know about me, I love my Natasha Denona eyeshadow. They are some of my favorite in terms of eyeshadow quality, and the formula that it has is just really amazing. So whenever Natasha Denona releases something, I'm like, tell me more. And then I saw this color story, and I was like, that is not my color story. These golden tones aren't really quite it. And then I found out that over half of the palette is identical to the Natasha Denona Gold palette, which I already own. So for me to be buying this palette, it really doesn't make a lot of sense, because I feel like the Golden that we're getting now is like the toned down version of the Gold. I mean, the Gold palette to me is still one of the best ones in my collection, but I especially like those tealy greens with the duochromes that we get in the one half of the palette. And all of the neutrally boring browns are some that are good, that I appreciate, but I don't really feel that they make the palette stand out to me in my collection. And the Golden is just a lot of the boring browns, which I have a million times over in my collection. So adding this just didn't make a lot of sense to me for two reasons. I already own this palette, essentially, and two, I already have too much like it in my collection anyway. So no matter how much I love the Natasha Denona formula, they are still one of my favorite brands for eyeshadow for sure, but the color story here is really what puts it down for me. Then another palette that I kind of had on the wish list, and then I took it off, and then I was like, oh, I'm not really sure, but it's the Bella Beauty Bar Secret Garden palette. So I've tried one Bella Beauty Bar last year, I think, the Smoky, was it just called? No, Smoky Glam, that's what it was called. And I really enjoyed the quality of the shadow that we're getting in there. But color story wise, it again was a little bit limiting for my preferences. And that's why I was like, maybe I should try some more Bella Beauty Bar. Maybe I will love this brand even more if I try a different color story from them. And the Secret Garden with these pinks and these greens really, really just floats my boat. I really enjoy looking at this. But then I look at it objectively and I'm like, I have pinks and greens in my collection. Do I need another pink and green eyeshadow palette? I don't think so. And then Monolith very, very kindly gifted me some palettes. They were going to send me something, and then I got the first one in. It's the Cosmic Dreamer by Ensley Rain, and you will have seen that in my most recent haul. I already told you about this. And this palette also has a lot of greens with some pinks and oranges. So I now have that palette, and I think, I definitely don't need the Bella Beauté bar anymore, even though I would love to try more from Bella Beauté bar. As I mentioned, I really enjoy their formula, but I think I'll wait for them to come out with something else that I like the look of even better. Because from the start, the minute this was announced, I was like, I like the look of this. I really think it's a beautiful, beautiful palette. I don't think it suits my makeup collection per se. So that's why I thought I'm going to hold off on this one and see if Bella Beauté bar can do something even more interesting. Next up is one that's kind of on the wish list still, but at the same time it's not. It is by Ensley Rain, the brand I just mentioned, and it's their Harvest Moon palette. And the Harvest Moon from Ensley Rain is one that I didn't get because I was like, it looks a little bit dark for me, but I have been into these like darker, grungier looks for sure. For some reason, 2024 has me really going for warm tones and grungy things. So then after trying Ensley Rain for the first time this year, I did kind of put this back onto the wish list because I was like, I think it looks really pretty. It's very, very stunning indeed. I believe the Harvest Moon has more shimmers than mattes, which is something I always enjoy. So I was like, I would like to try some more by them. But then again, I was sent a palette from that brand by Monolith, which they very kindly gifted me, and I'm like, yeah, I think I'm good. I don't really need it. Again, Ensley Rain is a little bit more expensive as well. Bella Beauté bar is too. And I therefore am a little bit more mindful of like what I choose from those brands. And I'm really hoping that they're going to do some stunning things for the fall time. Usually like October, November releases are some of my favorites in terms of what happens all year in makeup. Usually the spring, summer things aren't really my vibe. I really, really love fall releases, so I think for both of these brands, I think I'm going to wait to see what they're doing this fall. Similarly, for this brand, this is Gourmand Girls, the Spooky palette. I definitely put this in a shopping cart and then took it out, and Gourmand Girls is a brand I haven't tried before, and I would love to try them. And they do some really interesting color stories, but every single time I look at the palettes, I'm like, something's holding me back. And very often I see that their palettes have two nearly identical shades for like several colors. So they'll have two blues that are very similar, and they'll have two yellows that are very similar. And I'm like, do I then want to buy this palette? Because again, it's not very cheap for me to get. So even though I'm very curious to see what their formula is like, I'm still waiting for a color story that truly grabs me. And of the ones they've done so far, there have been a couple I've been eyeing up, but the Spooky is the one that keeps going around in circles in my head. Like, should that be my first one? I'm not sure. So here again, a brand where I just want to see what they're gonna do this fall season, just to see what they will be bringing out. And maybe I feel that's a bit more perfect for me than what they have been doing so far. This next release is a little bit older, but I still wanted to mention it because I haven't done a list like this in a while. I mean, for the most part, I buy plenty of eyeshadow palettes, so there isn't a lot that I'm like originally interested in and then I don't get it, because very often what I do with my palette purchases is that I plan them out and buy them with my budget throughout the year. So this one, I was like, yes, I really want to try these. I want to support the creator. And it's the Odin's Eye Halloween collection that they did with Angelica Nukvist last year. There were two palettes. I believe one of them was called Little Ghost, and I don't remember the name for the other one. And I just, like with Odin's Eye, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the brand. I love some of my older palettes, but things that they have been doing more recently, I personally haven't loved formula-wise, and therefore I sort of passed up on this. I was like, the past 2-3 releases I've tried haven't been very successful for me, so is this going to be the thing I'm going to love? And then I looked at the color stories a little bit more closely, and when I put them all together, it was essentially like a grungy rainbow, and I was like, I have things like that in my collection as well. Plus I felt it was a little bit too orange heavy, which happens a lot with Halloween palettes, and orange really isn't my shade. So that's why I was like, I'm going to pass up on this. Hopefully Odin's Eye does some really nice things again for the fall winter season, because those tend to be my favorite releases from them. So this is another brand where I'm like holding out to see what they're doing. Number 6 is the Danessa Myricks Groundwork number 2. It's the rosy toned one that they did. And this is a brand that I'm very much admiring from afar, but because it's so difficult for me to find, I haven't bit the bullet yet and decided what to get from this brand as a first purchase. I'm really interested in some of their complexion things for sure as well, but because I struggle so badly with getting my shade match just from finding something online, I haven't really been brave enough, you could say, to really try them. But this palette was one that definitely sparked my interest in the brand a little bit more. They are definitely more of a brand that goes towards makeup artistry, and I don't view myself as a makeup artist, so that's why I think a palette like this isn't necessarily right for me personally, but I can appreciate it for what it is and what it does for, I think, a lot of people. One of the things that holds me back with this one, though, isn't the colors and the fact that it's essentially like 20 different shades of rose. I love a rosy tone. You guys know this about me. I love my rosy tones. But the real reason why I didn't get this is because it got creams and mattes right next to each other. And if there's one pet peeve, is if there's a cream and a matte right next to each other, it will always end up being messy. It's very difficult to clean up, and it's just not something I want to commit to, especially now that the price point these go for, because the Danessa Myricks is definitely a more expensive brand. Another collection I passed up on is this one from Melt. It's the Nightmare Before Christmas palette, and I was very, very confused by this. Like, I get the collab, like Melt with Nightmare Before Christmas. I was like, yes, this totally makes sense. Very much reminds me of the Beetlejuice collection they did a couple of years ago. I own one of the palettes from that collection. And so when this was announced, I was super excited. And then I got to see the palettes and I was like, to me, that's not Nightmare Before Christmas. Sure, there are bright shades, but they're in the Christmas part, not in the nightmare part. So I felt we got a lot of Christmas and we didn't get a lot of nightmare with this collection. So that's why I decided to pass up on both. I think there were 2 palettes in this collection, and they just really reminded me of so many things Melt has already done. And I'm really feeling at this point like Melt is trying to recreate some of their like successes from the past and sort of doing things that are very similar to it, because one of these palettes reminded me a lot of one of the Beetlejuice palettes we got a couple of years ago. And I don't feel necessarily that these were necessary, and I think they also, if I remember correctly, because I don't have the image in front of me, but I believe the pans were a little like skewed, like they weren't in straight. I don't know, it's just not very pleasing to the eye for me if a palette does that, so that's why I was like, I'm gonna be passing up on this. Then next up is the Makeup by Mario The Neutrals palette. So this is one of his master mattes. And there is the original version, but I'm talking about the one that came out this year that has that cool tone gray in the bottom half. And this palette was very much promoted as a cool tone palette, but as someone who really enjoys cool tones and who can really get away with it because they have, like, I have a neutral undertone that skews a little bit more pinky more than anything else. So this, you might think, is right for me. I also love the Makeup by Mario formula. The Ethereal Eyes palette I tried earlier in the year is one of my favorites. It's sublime in terms of the quality that it has. But the reason why I didn't get this is because it is, first of all, a fully matte palette. And I don't really enjoy fully matte palettes. I've decluttered most of them over the years because I just don't reach for them. So for me, I knew that for how pricey this is, I wouldn't get the use out of it. But then when I also scrutinized the color story, I was like, you're calling this cool toned, but to me this doesn't look very cool toned. So it has a lot of renditions of like browns, and that can be really nice. I'm not gonna like knock it down for that, but for my personal preferences, it really doesn't really suit my needs, and therefore I passed up on the Makeup by Mario, the Neutrals. Then a palette that was definitely on the wish list and that I really wanted to check out in store because I had heard so many mixed reviews, and in the end, I'm so glad that I trusted my gut instinct on this one, and I didn't buy it straight away when it launched, and it's the Huda Beauty Creamy 9-pan palette in the grayish version. talking about a perfect cool toned color story, it doesn't get any more perfect than this, I think. But especially because this was promoted as like creams, I was like, I'm not sure if I can get down with a full cream eyeshadow palette. So I was like, you know what? I want to touch these. I want to swatch them in store and just look at this and see what it does if I swatch it. And the minute I saw this in a store, like every single time I've seen it in real life, it looks very messy because there's creams and powders in the same palette without any protective sort of flap or anything like that. So very messy. And the creams felt very weird to me. The texture of them just was very unpleasant. They kind of like when you swatched it on the back of your hand, it would just disappear when you blended it out. So for me, I was like, this is not going to be worth it. I love my Huda Beauty eyeshadow that I do have in my collection. And I think I'm just going to stick to this because this palette wasn't my favorite. And what I feel like Huda Beauty is doing as well is that she does a small palette first and then they kind of blow it up into a bigger version. I definitely feel that happened with the Wild Jaguar and the Pretty Grunge. I own both. And when I held them next to each other, I was like, right, these two palettes essentially do the same thing. So my hopes is that we're getting an 18 pan for the Christmas season like they do every year for Huda Beauty in this like cool tone version, but with fewer creams. That's the hope. That's the hope. So I'm holding up for that one. And the final palette I wanted to mention here is this guy from Blend Bunny. And this is one I went back and forth on so many times. When I first looked at the Sugar and Grunge, I didn't want to buy it. I was like, Sugar, Grunge, how is this a 90s palette? Like, sure, it has a kind of Saved by the Bell vibe, but if you're telling me grunge, I think Nirvana Nevermind video with like that very swampy green vibe that it has. So to me, the shades didn't really make a lot of sense in my brain. But as I started seeing more and more people showing this in their makeup collections, and I saw more people doing looks with this, I started to appreciate it just a little bit more. And I was like, you know what, this could be a nice one for me. I think that it has a couple of really good shades, but then something happened. Someone locally sued the name Sugar and Grunge or something like that, and they can no longer sell the palette. So as I was sort of starting to come to terms with the fact that this palette might be right for me, and I was sort of like putting it on my wish list, it was discontinued. So this one I can no longer buy, but it just took a little bit of time for me to wrap my head around. And now in the end, I'm actually glad I didn't get it, because that new Longing palette that Blend Bunny came out with, as you saw in my recent haul, I did buy that one. So that one is one I'm very happy with because it looks stunning. And I think that is giving me what I wanted the Sugar Grunge to be originally. And this one I like a lot better. So there you have it. Those are my 10 palettes I didn't buy, but that I did admire from afar for a little while. That I even put into wish lists, or I even put it into a shopping cart. And then in the end I decided, this may not be right for me. I definitely go back and forth with my opinions a lot. And because I work with a wish list / budgeting system, I definitely don't buy things the minute they are released. I try to stay away from hype. And that's the way I just like to make sense of things for myself. So I hope you really enjoyed watching this video today. Please enter the giveaway. I will make sure to link you to that video in the description box down below so you know how to enter. And I will be doing daily videos all about eyeshadow and eyeshadow palettes all month. So if you'd like to come back for more very, very soon, and I hope to see you in my next one. Thumbs this video up in the meantime, and subscribe if you want to stay updated with when I post new videos. Thank you so very much for being here. Take care. Bye-bye.